You're listening to the PropTech Pioneers podcast. This podcast brings startups and MLSs closer together by exploring the beauty and the struggle of real estate data and technology. I believe real estate is on the cusp of a major transformation driven by better access to data, a new crop of pragmatic founders, and pent-up frustration with the status quo. These are conversations with those pioneers that are leading that transformation within the MLS landscape. I'm your host, Evan Knowles. I'm an entrepreneur building a fintech company called Simba that helps realtors manage their financial health using MLS data. And I wish I had access to these conversations earlier in my journey. So I thought I'd help future entrepreneurs and MLS executives learn from each other in a more open and accessible fashion. I hope you enjoy. Now let's jump into it. All right, I'm sitting down with Josh Coleman, and we're going to discuss fair housing today. So, new developments in the real estate space. NAR is enforcing continuing education on fair housing. Big deal. It's a very important topic in today's world, especially as housing becomes more and more unaffordable. It's going to be a good convo. So, I met Josh at my first RESO, which is down in Sarasota. And then we caught up again at the last RESO in San Antonio. Great conversations all around. Always good to hang out with the SkySlope team. But fair housing is a big deal. Josh and his team are right in the middle of it with SkySlope. So I'm looking forward to kind of sharing with other founders and MLS execs what's going on that front. So Josh, thanks for joining.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So before we recorded here, we got on a call and chatted about the conversation today. I think the best place to start that we chatted about on that call for a bit is NAR's new legislation on fair housing. So give us the details for what you know about this new policy and how it affects realtors and technology companies from a high level, and then we'll dive into some details. But just give us the details on what NAR is enforcing here.
Yeah, so I'm sure a lot of the people listening have seen the news about NAR's new requirements for fair housing training, which is now required for all realtors every 3 years, and required for all new realtors are required to go through the training pretty much right away. So it's their response to a lot of the different events and litigation that's come up about fair housing and discrimination. In the past, kind of a springboard from their Fair Haven program, which a lot of people are familiar with, to further just do their part to battle these fair housing and discrimination issues, which unfortunately are still plaguing a lot of buyers out there.
Yeah. And was there anything that recently kind of sparked this, or has this been in the works for a while?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been in the works for a long time. I mean, discrimination and anti-fair housing has been going on in real estate for as long as we all can remember. NAR did a recent study, a survey from I think about a year or two ago, right about when we kind of got into the MLS and organized real estate space with our offers tool that we'll talk about later. But one of the more eye-opening studies and surveys that they did is they went out and surveyed a pretty wide swath of potential home buyers to figure out what's the fear, what's the concern, or what are they running up against when deciding whether or not to purchase a home. And what was really eye-opening was the ranking of reasons why they weren't maybe making an offer on a property or working towards purchasing a home. Number one, of course, was affordability, which I think we can all agree will always be the number one reason. But number two was discrimination. For the first time ever, was the simple fact that a potential home buyer was worried about being discriminated against, and there was enough worry there to stop them from actually, realizing the dream of home ownership, or simply just even looking at homes and looking to make an offer on one. So there's a lot of things like that we've seen in recent years come to light that are eye opening. The market shift has definitely brought a lot of these issues to light. As transaction volume dips, there's a more granular focus on each transaction, and we're starting to see things pop up, especially with newer realtors who maybe aren't familiar with the fair housing guidelines, which NAR has obviously responded to. That there's a lot of implicit bias in the transaction that agents might not be conscious to, but it happens implicitly and subconsciously throughout the transaction. And when the market slows and volume goes down, it seems like each transaction is just under a stronger microscope, so to speak.
Yeah. So you mentioned kind of implicit biases there. I want to kind of dive in here. One of the more obvious cases of discrimination that, NAR and the mortgage industry has been in the middle of, in the past is, redlining. That's something that's been kind of put out in the world. Now it's, no longer the case, but the ramifications of that are still, happening today. The communities that people grow up in a lot of ways have been influenced by redlining and that unfortunate history in the housing industry. But today there's a lot less obvious ways that discrimination is happening and biases, in the industry. When we got on our call to prepare for this, you had a few ways that, I hadn't even heard of or thought of that could lead to bias or discrimination. One of them was love letters from, buyers. What are some other examples of this that, you see in the industry that might not be obvious that, can lead to discrimination?
Yeah, love letters is definitely one that's gotten a lot of media attention in the last year or so. A big part of that was Oregon. Instead of Oregon working towards banning love letters, although it has since been overturned. I mean, it's proof that they pose a real issue when it comes to fair housing and discrimination. And it's a great example of what happens within a transaction in real estate where we're not focusing on the true merits of the offer or the transaction or the person making an offer on the home, for example. It really shouldn't be focused on the person, their backgrounds, their history. It should be focused on, what they're bringing to the table with the offer. Right? Is it, as a seller, is this the right offer for me, or is this the right makeup of the transaction? So love letters is a really great example of that. Other bias that has come to light that we've seen is going back to implicit bias, around buyer name and even in some cases buyer agent name, right? Because sometimes we associate a certain buyer's agent with a certain type of buyer, which is unfortunate and unacceptable. So there's some implicit biases around that. Discrimination on top of on type of financing. That's one of the more, I guess you can say, ones that pops out, or everyone's kind of, they kind of figured that would be the case, I guess you can say, where, we're discriminating against, it's an FHA, it's not a, conventional loan, or it's not an all cash buyer, things like that. So diving into some of those biases based off financing on the offer within the transaction. And back to your example of redlining or steering, there's been some news about that in the last couple of days. We hear a lot of stories about, steering certain buyers from neighborhoods just based off race or ethnicity or background or sexual orientation, things like that. Long Island Divided is a great example. It's not very recent, but it happened a few years ago where they found out, in New York, in 49% of cases, African American buyers were steered away from white neighborhoods. And there was a response to that, but there was really little done to do that outside of just getting some attention. So different things like that we're seeing examples of bias, whether it's redlining or steering or just some of the more implicit subconscious things that happen that don't focus on the true merits of the real estate transaction or the offer that the buyer is putting forth.
Yeah. And a couple others that I'm familiar with are, property descriptions. So MLSs are, keeping up with that compliance of how are you listing this property? Are you putting things in here that will steer people away from this or attract a certain, demographic? Or, for example, there's all kinds of things like really, less obvious ways of describing a home, walking distance to, X, Y, and Z. That you might ask, well, why is that discrimination? Well, there's some people that are not capable of, walking that distance. So It's those kinds of things that, are not obvious that, are forms of discrimination. Another one that, as a startup founder, we've actually run into is it's really hard to advertise in the housing space on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Facebook has actually done a good job watching out for this, fair housing laws and advertising to make sure that, companies and advertisers are not targeting certain demographics with ads to, sell housing. And it bleeds its way into, we're a software company selling to realtors, and we can't, use the words real estate, realtors, real estate agents in our ads because it flags fair housing. And so there's all kinds of ways that I do think the industry has come a very long way. And you even are starting to see it bleed into massive organizations like Facebook because everybody wants to take this seriously. Housing is the bedrock of our economy, and you want everybody to have, fair access to that. Now, a few of these ways that discrimination takes place can be solved by technology. I mentioned it there with machine learning and basically social listening and NLP. Facebook is, reading ads and making sure that there is not bias in ads. So that can be done on an MLS level when property descriptions are put in. Now machine learning and natural language processing is able to say, oh, let's flag this. This doesn't meet our compliance rules. You all at SkySlope are doing some of this in really important ways as well. And there's many other startups entering the space that can help with this. So give us the quick elevator pitch on SkySlope. I know you do it all the time. Give us your role at SkySlope, and then go into some ways that you all are helping with this, and maybe how other startups should think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the MLS level, we see really the net effect of what we're trying to accomplish felt, at that level. Tools that meet the realtor where they're already working first and foremost, to make it easy and adoptable at critical points in the transaction in order to realize the net effect of our vision and our approach to this. It always goes back to the 80-20, right? So 20% of the realtors do 80% of the business. So, at SkySlope, what we're doing here to focus on, fair housing is taking, that 80-20 rule into play and into consideration where, we know that top producers, they're educated, they're professional, they're fiduciaries to their clients. They kind of know how this works. They know where fair housing comes into play. They know where things can be perceived as discrimination or anti-fair housing. So as a vendor, how can we bring tools forward to them that gives that other 80% what the 20% already knows without making extra work on that particular realtor or agent, and of course without taking them out of the transaction, right? So what SkySlope offers in particular is our offer management module that at a base level does what an offer management system typically does. It helps an agent juggle multiple offers and improves communication between parties. But our main goal there too is fair housing, is how can we continue the education of fair housing and the code of ethics that are set forth, whether it's NAR's code of ethics or any MLS specific code of ethics as well. We found out that a lot of MLSs have their own code of ethics that maybe sometimes go a little bit deeper, and we want to bring attention to those and provide further education so that, as a realtor is moving through the offer process, they're reminded of the red flags and where things can slip up and be perceived as bias or discrimination, without taking them out of the center of the transaction. And a lot of that's done through, obfuscating buyer names, obfuscating buyer agent names, discouraging love letters. We can't avoid an agent, uploading a love letter into our system. We're not that much Big Brother, but we can at least discourage it and educate them on that. And a lot of that too is data as well, which we see is very crucial. Especially in the market that we saw in the last couple of years, the COVID market, where everything was a multiple offer situation, right? If the house was livable and had clean title, it was going to be a multi-offer situation. And as a buyer's agent, it was fairly easy to get your buyer to write an offer on that property, and it's going to be $50K over asking, $100K in some cases. But as these offers were sifted through and offers were, of course, inevitably rejected, there wasn't a whole lot of transparency and data coming from the listing side to the buy side, where the buyer's agents or the buyer themselves knew where their offer stood in the process, right? They were just told, hey, you just didn't offer enough money, or maybe they were discriminated against because of the type of financing they brought forth, or maybe they were discriminated against because of their name or the buyer agent that they were working for. But at the end of the day, if we can empower agents to with data so that they can transparently share back to the buy side, here's how your offer ranked against the other offers, and here were the merits of the offer that we looked at, so that when you go into your next property, you can go into that next property with a little bit more confidence and some data to kind of back that up, and a little more empowerment, so that every buyer gets a fair shake, and every buyer feels empowered when they're going into making an offer on a property. And in the background, we're tracking everything, right? We have great activity logs. For those of you that use SkySlope out there, know about our transaction management system. Tracking and compliance has always been a big focal point for us. So by tracking all the events of the offer and making sure that the communication's there and it's transparent, every offer is being seen, which is right there within the NAR Code of Ethics. We can have those checks and balances and help agents be held more accountable. But again, it goes back to making sure that they're still at the heart of the transaction. We're just empowering them along the way.
Yeah. I think one of the big things that I'm becoming much more attuned to and care about more in the technology landscape are a couple of things you mentioned. Transparency. So seeing why decisions are being made. I actually think that there's going to be a new vertical of software empowered by artificial intelligence that is considered decision management software. You all call this offer management software, but there will be software that pops up that will be just general decision management software that gives transparency into who's making the decision, who are the stakeholders, why do they choose this decision, what data went into this decision, and then where I think AI comes into this is AI will just be there as an assistant, watching these decisions happening, watching the conversation, the communication that's happening around these decisions, and saying, hey, I'm going to flag this because there's bias in this sentence. Here's why it's considered biased. And then that decision can be a much more informed, healthy decision. And, that will for sure happen around, offers in the real estate space. And I'm sure you guys are on the path to doing that, if not already doing that with AI. But that's one thing, is transparency. And the other one that does go along with transparency is bringing in as much data as possible. So interoperability, exposing as much data as possible. I think as the real estate industry matures more and more and different systems become interoperable, a lot of this bias and a lot of these bad practices will be weeded out because the data will be there to show, hey, this was a biased decision or this was not compliant. And I think a lot of the problem in the real estate industry right now is that there's just not a lot of interoperability. So it's hard to catch these things at scale. And as that improves, I think the whole industry will improve and these decisions will get much better, more efficient, and less biased. So I definitely think that those are the two things that stood out to me the most that were interesting about what you all are doing. There's two other kind of layers to the industry that I want to kind of ask you about on how they're approaching bias as well. And they're the two other stakeholders. So you mentioned that SkySlope's helping agents, keeping them at the center of the transaction. So let's just say you all are there specifically for the agents. Obviously, you sell through brokerages to reach those agents. What are brokers doing to help their agents with discrimination, maybe outside of technology? Have you seen any unique, or maybe it does include technology, but have you seen any unique examples of brokerages going out of their way to do special things to avoid bias?
A lot of the bigger brokerages out there, especially ones that are maybe shareholders within an NLS or an MLS are part of, any NAR committees or, are involved in the DEI committees that NAR has set forth, or especially in metro areas too, where this is really prominent. I haven't seen any specific examples of what they're doing, but I know some of the bigger brokerages try to further the education around fair housing and discrimination, because at the end of the day, when litigation happens, it puts not only the agent at risk, it puts the broker at risk too. So it would behoove the broker or the broker owner to not try to promote this and enhance education. And of course, it goes back to something very simple, which is, just basic brokerage technology. If your brokerage is paperless and you're tracking docs and communication, you're definitely, it's a start. And we see a lot of brokerages that are still using paper and trying to track, wet signatures and actual, hard documents. And, if you're doing that still, it's really hard to track what your agents are doing and try to track that communication and provide education and training to agents to let them know hey, this could be perceived as this, or this is not the right way to go about this. So if your brokerage is tech forward and you're giving technology to your agents that is with them in the transaction, that meets them where they're already working, that's easily adoptable and supported well, then you're on the right track to at least being able to kind of oversee things and have some transparency into the process that now empowers the broker. Right, I use empower a lot. It's a kind of a buzzword these days, but it empowers the broker now to go to those agents and say, hey, I'm here with you. I'm here to help. I want you to succeed. I want to retain you as one of my agents. I know you can be a top producer, but here are some things maybe that you should think about as you move through this transaction process.
Yeah. And then another stakeholder in this is are the MLSs and the associations. And maybe the better question here is, who's paying for, these measures to take discrimination, out of the industry. So for your all's offer product, is this something you're selling through MLSs, direct to brokerages? Give us an idea of what MLSs roles are in discrimination and making sure that it doesn't happen. And then, who's paying for these solutions that help eliminate bias?
Absolutely. Yeah. So with SkySlip offers, we sell this directly and exclusively to MLSs and associations. And the reason behind that is nobody touches more agents than MLSs, right? This is where agents transact every day. We see MLSs that represents as many as 100,000 plus agents, and as little as 1,000. But nobody touches or works with agents more than MLSs. It's where they go to transact. It's where they go to for technology a lot of the time. So with SkySlip offers, when we got into the space and we saw that there was a need for something, we call it offer movement at SkySlip to help address, for housing and discrimination. We went straight to the MLS and we said, how could we work together to not only make the process of managing offers better, but to address, fair housing. So we see that MLSs are really the key here to take on these different technologies that help address what's really going on in the industry and kind of play their part to help agents navigate these kind of muddy waters and help them realize where they could be entering into a situation where it could be anti-fair housing or discrimination. The other part of that is just making it a wholly integrated experience. Nobody does that better than the MLS themselves. Again, it goes back to the agent. This is where they're transacting. This is where they're going for technology. So if we could meet them there with these tools, then we're more likely to get adoption. The adoption that's proper to making sure we're realizing the net effect of these systems, that agents are using it. But also it goes back to what you brought up previously with data, right? The more data we can see being pumped through these platforms, the more transparency and the more information can be shared and be seen so that we can make proactive measures to go in and see, where things are happening that shouldn't be happening and help agents with a little bit of guidance. So, we see the MLS as really key players in these types of technologies.
Yeah. And this is kind of a perfect time to transition to one of the topics I wanted to chat about here, which was go to market. I've been going through this the last 2 years, and go to market in this industry is just such a puzzle, man. Like SkySlip obviously is at such a different scale and has so much leverage and kind of penetration in the industry. And you guys have learned so much. So I want to kind of pivot the conversation here and help founders and also help MLS execs know what we go through to go to market. Because, there could be great products out there that maybe just are struggling with go to market. And if they figured that out, the industry could really adopt them. So one question I have about what you just went through there was you're selling through the MLSs. As you said, it's the best way to touch as many realtors as possible, um, and pull in data. Obviously, that's the kind of source of truth for data in the industry. Are you all
Mhm.
using a widget within the MLSs and kind of making it feel native to the MLS technology for the agents? Give us an idea of what that experience looks like, so other founders can know what's possible when it comes to integration with an MLS.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we do things, like single sign on, and we have various ways of using our APIs to further embed SkySlope in an existing hub or marketplace. We see a lot of MLSs going this direction where they have a hub of different tools that make it native to the MLS, so they can bring agents into this hub to this marketplace, and then they can go in and see what's available there to the MLS, and then kind of working those tools from there. So anytime we enter into a partnership with an MLS, there's a very deep integration there to make sure that the agents are going to the MLS hub marketplace. It feels native to the MLS, that they feel like a member of the MLS, which, as the market shifts the way it is now, and transactions are few and far between, one of the things that MLSs strive to do, or should strive to do, is to justify their member dues. And part of that is just making sure that they're properly portraying their value to their members, and they're making their members feel like members, right? So we can kind of keep them close to the vest with the MLS. And so one of the big initiatives for SkySlope when we go and partner with an MLS is creating a truly wholly integrated experience with the MLS to make sure that that's where the agent's going. We're meeting the agent there. We're making that process really as simple as possible, right? If you're coming in and you're partnering with an MLS as a vendor, and you're not meeting the realtor where they're already working, and you're forcing them to go into another app, it's going to be really an uphill battle to get them to adopt things. And that's what MLSs strive for with these vendor partnerships, is they want adoption. They want agents to use what they're offering. They want to be seen as the source of truth. They want to be seen as saviors as well. And really these downturn markets, we see it's the best time for MLSs to invest in these technologies that are wholly integrated and made to feel native to the MLS, that justifies and also proves their value at the same time.
Yeah, I 100% agree with everything you just said, and I agree with it because of the pain I've gone through with Simba. It's as a founder new to the space, you have this great idea, very powerful, exciting vision about a product you're going to build, and it kind of intuitively makes sense to take it to agents first and build around their experience. And I think one mistake that Simba made that we're correcting and working on correcting is exactly what you said, is how do you make your product feel native to the MLS? And so, what we do at Simba is we blend an agent's sales transaction data that's found in the MLS with their banking. And, we just didn't go straight to the MLSs from day one. Frankly, I didn't know the MLS landscape was as great of a go-to-market tool as it is. But that is one thing we've learned, that when the deeper integration you have with the MLS, the more native it feels, the better you're going to have a chance of getting adoption. Because our problem is we're asking agents to download our application, input a good amount of data. It's redundant data. It lives in SkySlope. It lives in their CRM. It might live in their back office software. And it's just
Right.
one more place they got to go do that. And so that was one big learning, that, go to market and product development in this industry, as with any industry, but especially this one, are tightly coupled. And I think that's one thing that founders really need to be thinking of when they enter the space. So, give us an idea of your career that you've had in the industry, because you've been doing business development for a while now. I'm sure you've learned a lot beyond what you just described of working with the MLSs. After you give an idea of how long you've been here and kind of what your role is there at SkySlope, give us some learnings that you think have stuck out the most over the years you've been in the industry.
Yeah, love to. I mean, it's been a wild ride to say the least. I came from a background that was sales focused, but non real estate, and so I joined SkySlope back in 2014, and it was really an eye opening experience to see what agents go through, because back then it was still kind of a new idea to have a paperless transaction management platform. A lot of agents were still going out and getting wet signatures and and faxing documents in. I mean, we have a fax button in our platform still for those old school agents that need to fax into the system, which is crazy. And so, what I've learned over the last 9-10 years that I've been at SkySlope in a business development role is really, it's all about change management, right? We're dealing with a lot of different companies and entities that have done things a certain way for such a long time, and there's a wide range of technologies out there, and it can often be overwhelming. And we're part of that. We're both vendors, so as long as these vendors can effectively help these different brokerages or MLSs or associations, agents, whoever they're working with, navigate change management and support these companies as a vendor and be more of a partner, take a more collaborative approach, which is very important. Then we can really help them have success, help them have adoption, and then realize the goal at the end of the day, which is always just making things easier for agents. And at the same time too, it's vendors effectively helping their clients, get better control of their data too at the same time, which goes back to keeping agents, native to the MLS, or keeping agents native to whatever softwares are available at the brokerage that the brokerage wants to keep their agents, inside of. A lot of brokerages have their own technologies, especially the bigger guys, that they want to keep agents kind of close to. They've invested a lot into it. So with vendors, it goes back to flexibility. If you can have flexibility that caters to the goals of the brokerage or the goals of the MLS, it goes back to, again, helping out with change management, not making a huge shift on the agents when you're bringing in new technologies, but rather kind of molding to the goals of the company that you're looking to work with, whether it's a brokerage or an MLS. And again, it goes back to adoption. The more that we can handle these kind of or navigate these areas where we can jeopardize adoption, the better we can navigate those, the better adoption you're going to get, and then the more lifetime partners you're going to make as well.
Yeah. On that adoption piece, how do you work with MLSs to drive adoption? I think one of the things people talk about when they go to market through the MLSs is that MLSs aren't great at marketing, at driving adoption. You got to really do it alongside of them, or even be the one that pushes that adoption. You should be the one taking it into your own hands as the vendor in the company to work with that MLS to drive as much adoption as possible. How does SkySlope go about that? What are some practices you all have in place on the ground within these regional MLSs that you found success in driving adoption on the ground? Because you often hear a good adoption rate is what, 10, 15%. I mean, that would be a great adoption rate. You all might see higher than that because of the brand name and kind of the importance of what you all do and being so close to the center of a transaction. But that adoption rate of being 20% being super high and typically falling between 10 and 15% being normal, that's tough. So what are you all doing that you all are seeing success with?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, we set proper expectations, right? We get it. We don't expect that 100% of the subscribers or members of an MLS we're working with are going to use our platforms. In a perfect world, that'd be great. But it goes at the top of the funnel. It's really just setting proper expectations and being a good collaborative partner with your MLS. If you're a vendor to the MLS, it's very different than being a partner. We're not just offering an out of the box solution that they can just run with and we'll see what happens. It's really a collaborative partnership through and through from start to finish. So a lot of the things that we do, which goes back to since SkySlope started back in 2011, is we take on a lot of the training. We train all the agents. We train all the MLS staff. We make sure that there's a deep understanding of our softwares, the visions of our softwares, kind of what we think is valuable, but also listening to what they think is valuable and taking in that feedback as we go. And then it goes back to marketing too. You mentioned that, making sure that we're marketing this properly to agents and not just saying, hey, this is SkySlope and this is great. Here's how we want to market it to your members. It's what's also important to the MLS. What's the MLS envisioning? What's the message that they want to get out to the members about this partnership? Let's work together on that to make sure that Members understand what the vision is with the MLS, what they're bringing to the table with this partnership, along with what SkySlope is bringing to the table, and kind of marrying those two messages together. And it goes as deep as making sure that our product teams are working in tandem. And our product team is flexible, and when it comes to integrations, whether it's single sign-on or ad edit, things like that. Again, it goes back to just being that collaborative partner with these MLSs to ensure that the messaging is correct, that agents are getting properly trained. There's an understanding of the platform, but again, setting the proper expectation with these partnerships, and not selling some kind of pipe dream, that every member is going to use it, but setting the tone for a proper business partnership seems to have really the best results for us.
Yeah. And the last question on this front with the MLSs, or take it even to brokerages, what can founders and what can we expect for sales cycles? That's one thing that you have to take into account when you go into market. How do you balance sales cycles, runway, sales talent, and just resources and marketing spend around these sales cycles to make sure that you're hitting them right? What do you see at the MLS level as far as maybe the average sales cycle, and then with brokerages, what do you see?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, understandably, MLS sales cycles are going to be a little bit longer, especially the bigger the MLS gets. They have a lot of subscribers that they're answering to, that they're servicing. So making a change at an MLS level is definitely a huge decision for any MLS, even the smaller guys all the way up to the bigger guys that we see across the country. So the sales cycle there, we could be talking about anywhere from 2, 3, 4, 5 years, maybe sometimes a little bit longer. The buying process for them is, of course, always predetermined in a lot of cases. There's committees, there's advisory groups, there's executive teams. There's a lot of research that goes into what you're bringing to the table, how you can integrate properly into their systems. Who are you guys already working with? What subscribers are already familiar with your tools. So there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of collaboration at the MLS level. So expect a very long sales cycle, and expect a kind of a predetermined process for how these products are considered when they're going to in the exploration phases. With brokerages, we've been selling into brokerages for the past 12 years through our core product, our transaction management system. And it varies. And I think it really is very market driven with brokerages, more so than MLSs, as the market ebbs and flows. And sometimes it could be very seasonal as well. Different needs for the brokerage will kind of, pop up and fade away, and it goes to, what the brokerage's goals are for that year or the years to come. Are they looking to retain agents or recruit agents, or are they looking to be more efficient with their admin and staff processes, things like that? So that one's very market driven. We've talked to brokerages that needed a paperless solution yesterday, and we've talked to brokerages for years that are still not ready to make that change and pull the trigger on something that's going to change the process for their agent. And it goes back to change management, keeping their agents happy, but balancing right technology. And if it goes down to agents, we don't really typically sell directly into agents, but it's also kind of it could be market driven. But for agents, it's very fast in that sales process. From what I've seen, it's really just comes down to, is it the right product that can actually help them and help them close more deals and close more deals faster.
Yeah, that 1 year plus, 2 year plus sales cycle in the MLS, that gave me some stress just hearing that, and I'm going through it. So it's just like I hate to hear that because I'm experiencing it firsthand. It's really hard because you almost have to be private equity backed or have some unique funding to outlast these sales cycles in the early stages of your business. If you're an MLS technology or you get distribution through MLSs as a startup founder, VC money, that's not how that game works. VC is looking to deploy capital quickly and get to market quickly. And industries like real estate, where, it takes a year, 2 years plus,
Mm-hmm.
you've got to find alternative capital, or very, very patient capital. And that's typically not going to be, VC capital. So that's something founders are going to be thinking of is that sales cycle, and build your company around, again, what does it look like to integrate with the MLSs and feel native, but also you've got to take into account. That's why I always try to ask any go-to-market leader that question of sales cycles to just get a finger on the pulse of that. Is you've got to be able to fundraise and fund your business that matches that as well. And that's very hard in the early stages.
Yeah.
So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that insight. The last question here, what gets you excited? What's a trend going on in the real estate industry that has nothing to do with SkySlope, that gets you really excited, that you see and say, man, that's great for the space. That's great for consumers. That's great for technology. What's something that's getting you fired up?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on with AI. I think that's kind of the hot topic right now in real estate. There's a lot of great products coming to light that have great AI based tools that I think are really great. And I think many of them actually really do make the agent's job easier without cutting the agent out of the transaction. So that's really exciting to see some of these new entrants to the space and new products that are popping up that utilize AI the right way on the behalf of the agents to make their jobs easier, but keeping them central to the deal. But another thing too, I was just talking about this with an MLS executive about a couple months ago, is the focus on the consumer. A lot of it's what we talked about today with fair housing, is thinking about them a little bit further and what affects them throughout the biggest decision of their life. But also allowing the consumer to be more transparent in the process. I think that's going to have its ups and downs in a lot of cases, to be quite honest. But I think in the long run, when we can educate consumers on the transaction process, I think in the long run we can help those consumers by allowing them to make more informed decisions, but also allowing them to see really how truly great realtors are. What the amount of work that they go through to be fiduciaries for their clients, the professionalism involved in being a realtor, or what a realtor really means. I think the more that we can expose consumers to that, we can start to shed away some of the negative connotations that go along that consumers have about what an agent does for them, and what are they really paying for with their commissions, things like that. So that there's been a few ideas that I've seen come across the table about how we can just provide a little bit more insight for consumers and transparency. And I think in the long run, if done correctly, that could be really good for the industry.
Yeah, no, I think AI, as far as I can tell, is going to be great for the industry. Great for realtors. I think what's
Mm-hmm.
going to happen for realtors is a lot's going to be taken off their plate. I think one thing that realtors spend a lot of time doing is educating consumers on different aspects of the transaction. And I think what could actually happen is, Zillow, Realtor.com, they're all going to release, these agents, these AI agents that I think are going to, at the very least, I think they're going to push back the time when a consumer reaches out to a realtor, because they're going to be able to answer a lot of their own questions. But what I think is going to come to the realization, what you said there is, oh man, I've got these answers. I've got this AI assistant helping me with this. I still don't feel comfortable with this transaction by myself, and it really makes the value of a realtor very apparent,
Mm-hmm.
because whether there's an AI there or not, consumers want that human trust and that kind of human touch, and then they want somebody there to blame. I think that's one thing, and I don't say that in a negative way. I say that when somebody goes through a very large transaction, the reason they get somebody else to help them with that is because they don't want that stress. They have loss aversion, and I think that the industry is going to really thrive when they build the right types of artificial intelligence to help consumers educate themselves, but also educate themselves on, hey, there's a lot at stake here. There's a lot that I, as an AI assistant, can help you with, but a realtor is going to take it, the extra mile, and they're going to close the transaction for you.
Yep.
That's kind of how I see it playing out. Is you hear all about AI assistants and co-pilots is another word for it, helping developers become 10x developers. I think the best realtors are going to become even more productive and the ones that maybe are mid tier or brand new to the industry can do 10x the work. So I
Yep.
think that's what you're going to start to see with AI in the space. And I do agree. I'm very excited about it as
Yeah, I
well.
think it goes. I think it goes back to the 80-20 rule that I mentioned earlier. Is the more that we could give that 80% what the 20% is already doing through the right technology and kind of level the playing field, then I think everybody benefits from that in the long run.
Absolutely. Well, Josh, thanks for coming on. I think it's a very important, relevant topic that is being talked about a lot right now. So appreciate you stepping up. This is one of those beautiful things about what's happening with this podcast. It's resonating. Josh reached out and said, "Hey, I'm a big fan. I think this is a topic that we should discuss."
Yep.
And I'm glad we did. So I appreciate you reaching out and giving some feedback on the podcast and letting me know what the listeners might want to hear. So thanks for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's been great.